First of all, thank you so much for being here. I saw the day today, and I was like, I wonder if anybody's even going to show up. So thank you, because that means a lot to me. Thank you, Daniela, for thinking of me and inviting me to this opportunity. Very excited to be here. I figured good way to kind of start would be talk about who am I? How did I get here? I'm fortunate. If any veterinarians in the house? Anybody vet? No? Okay. So many of us involved with animals. I was very blessed. From a very, very early age, I knew what I was to do. By the time I could pronounce the word veterinarian, that's what I was going to be.
Some people still can't pronounce it.
Exactly. My daughter says animal doctor, so that's a lot easier. But I think my path was set from the beginning, and my journey has kind of been quite an interesting one. So by the time I was 12 or 13, my mom took me to school, and she signed a form allowing me to legally work. So I started working at that point, 12 or 13 years old, as a kennel aide at the local animal hospital. And by the time I graduated high school, I'd worked my way up to, rather than just giving cats baths and cleaning cages, I was actually helping with more restraint and procedures and stuff like that. I then went on to, so I was in a suburb of New York City, and I went on to my undergraduate at Cornell University, spent 4 years there as an undergraduate, and when I graduated, and then I stayed on 4 more years as a veterinary, for veterinary school. And I got out, quite an ego, ready to save the world, kind of could do what I could. I was going to be an emergency critical care veterinarian. I got the heck out of the cold, rain, and snow for a little while. So I was upstate New York, and I moved to San Diego, where I did an emergency and critical care internship. And I was quite the adrenaline junkie. So like the emergency and all that kind of stuff really intrigued me, and I had a lot of passion for it, and I had a lot of success in that process. But even then, early on, I started to see a lot of the limitations of what conventional care had to offer. Especially when we're dealing with a lot of chronic disease states, okay? Older animals who you've kind of like maxed out on what you can provide them. If the Rimadyl doesn't work and they're blowing out with diarrhea, or the prednisone's not helping, what are your options, okay? So I started to kind of do some questioning, and then what happened is, really drove it home, was my own dog Max, who's like my boy. He got sick. He developed a brain tumor. And Max was a product of conventional veterinary care. When I was in vet school, if there was a vaccine, he got it. Pesticide, he took it. He had IBD by the time inflammatory bowel disease, by the time I got out of vet school. So he was on science diet, and then he had all the prescription diets. And by the time he was 10, he had a brain tumor, and he was maxed out on prednisone. He's throwing up blood. He wouldn't eat, couldn't get up. And I was like, okay, I either make a decision to put him to sleep, or I think of something else. And at that stage of my life, I thought like holistic medicine. I was heresy. I thought they had no place in veterinary medicine. It wasn't founded in science. I had all the strong medicine. But when your own dog is dying, you kind of have to check yourself. You check your ego at the door, and you kind of like open your mind. And I did. And I took Max to a holistic veterinarian in San Diego. And the first thing he did is you have to stop feeding him this crap. And he put him on a raw food diet. And he halved his dose or cut his dose of pred and gave him this little pellet of homeopathic remedy and some supplements. And I took Max home. And I didn't have any hope. I was like, oh, well, at least I tried. If this doesn't work, I can put him down still. Well, Max got better. He started eating. He lived actually another 6 months of a good quality of life with a brain tumor where 6 months earlier he couldn't walk. And he ate till the day he died, So that to me is Max's legacy is what I do today, okay? Besides opening up my mind, he truly opened up my heart. And he made me realize that there was so much more that we could offer. And it not only changed the way I practice medicine, it really changed my life, okay? So from there I started to look more critically at what was going on, and I would work my graveyards at the emergency clinic, and then I'd go and sit and hang out with this guy on his front porch as he would take cases, and he blew my mind. Like all these things that I came out of this ivy tower where I was like, this is the way to do it, were wrong, or at least were not helping. And I started to question a lot of the things that was going down even in the emergency clinic. And around that time, it was karmic intervention. Their international acupuncture course, the certification course, was offered in San Diego. And the specialty clinic I was working out of didn't want to lose me as a doctor, so they said, oh, go take this class. They're like, let's keep him busy, just keep him around, right? So I took the class, the veterinary acupuncture, and I caught the bug, and it was this huge medical system, so complex, yet so eloquently simple at the same time. And it provided such an outlet for me to kind of explore, and it was kind of like the beginning of a quest of lifelong learning, like this unquenchable desire to know more. How else can I help? And so I started seeing acupuncture patients out of the specialty clinic, which was kind of cool. I had my own little room. It was like a little fountain and candles. I mean, they're all like super zenned out. And the animals liked it. And a lot of times I had opportunities. San Diego was nice like this all the time. So I would just put a blanket out in front of in the practice on the grass. and I would do my acupuncture patients there. And animals, they loved it, you know. So fairly quickly, I started to get busy. And then, you know, 1 day a week, then it was 2 days a week, and then I was like, why am I giving them half of what I was making for them not doing anything, not even, you know, encouraging me? So then, you know, as a veterinarian, I'm like the worst business person in the planet, okay? I would like give it all away. I'd be really happy, but I'd be super poor. But, you know, again, karmic intervention, I met my future wife, who happens to be a business person. And she was CFO of a biotech company in San Diego and had sold out their technology, so she was willfully unemployed. And I was like, well, she's like, why don't we just do this together? And I said, okay, but I don't want to do it different. I didn't want to have like a practice. I didn't want to have like a cold clinical setting where you go in and the smells and all that stuff. So we rented like a little two-bedroom cottage, and we converted that into the clinic. So the bedrooms became my exam rooms, and the living room was the reception area, and the kitchen was my pharmacy. And, you know, very quickly I realized I needed to know a lot more than what I did. So that's where that unquenchable desire for more kind of kicked in, and I started rapidly studying Chinese herbal medicine. I got certified in herbal medicine, looking into chiropractic, and then I started to get all into other things in terms of like studying a lot more different herbal modalities. By the time, and very quickly, my practice exploded. In this time I was there, by the time I left there, I sold the practice in 2013, and I had 3 doctors working for me, 2 chiropractors, and a massage therapist. And I was out of this two little cottage that we had already added another room, and we had moved over into the next building. So it exploded. It was super successful, very rewarding, but that came at a big price, and the price was unfortunately my health. Okay, so I had worked myself kind of to the bone, because I'm kind of one of those guys that give, yet I wasn't doing a very good job of taking care of myself. So kind of crash and burn, and right before that, I sold the practice and had decided for a long time I wanted to come up here. The Northwest had drawn me for a long time, Mother Nature. I love being in the outdoors. It's my therapy. So we got up here, and I quite happily took about a year off, and kind of like got myself back together and tried to figure out how I can do it now without having that happen again. So that's still a work in progress. But right now, it was hard, because I got to tell you, starting over is tough. I had a thriving practice. I was well known in the community. You came up here, nobody knows you for nothing, right? So what I did is I checked in with, there's other folks who practice holistic medicine in town, like Two Rivers Vet, Holistic Pet Vet Clinic, Hawthorne Veterinary Clinic, all these other clinics that are doing kind of what I did, a little bit different, but they're doing it. And I asked if anybody needed help, and nobody did. So I said, I guess that's the kind of a sign that I need to do my own thing. So I started hitting the ground, and I started pounding the pavement. I started doing house calls. And I just went out to all the little holistic pet food stores in town, which we are very lucky to have some of these resources like that we have here. And I started networking, and then things got busier and busier. And then in September, Beth and I opened up the Animal Healing Arts of Portland here on Northeast Broadway. We just, again, same kind of model. We have a little 2-bedroom house, and we just converted it over to the clinic, So, and that's kind of where we're at, and that's how I got to here. So a couple of things I just want to clear up, because there's a lot of confusion, and there's a lot of buzzwords that fly around. You always hear integrative veterinary medicine, or holistic veterinary medicine, or complementary and alternative veterinary medicine. So I just want to clear up, so when I talk about conventional veterinary medicine, that's what we learn in school. That's what most of us, probably at Beaverton Pet Clinic, you guys are probably practicing conventional veterinary medicine. So, and that's kind of what we know, okay? That's what all of us kind of know. And on some level, that's allopathic. That's the other term I'll throw out a lot. And allopathic, by definition, is the treatment of a disease by conventional means. For example, with drugs and surgery that have the opposite of effect of the symptom. So I call it somewhat of the anti-medicine. So the anti-inflammatory, the anti-nausea, anti-diarrheal, antihistamine. So it's anti. So in essence, it's taking what the symptom is telling you and saying, go away. We don't like to see this symptom, okay? So when I talk about conventional allopathic, that's kind of what I'm talking about. But here today, why we're here, why you braved the tough weather to get here, is that we're talking about holistic, okay? And to me, I don't use the term integrative so much. I look at it as holistic because I'm taking the big picture. And that conventional allopathic portion of medicine is part of holism, okay? And the holistic principle is that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, okay? That the big picture gives us that information. And that goes beyond, and this is a thing I think we lose out when we're practicing solely conventional medicine, is that there's actually beyond those physical set of symptoms, there's a mental, there's an emotional, and to be honest with you, a spiritual component to all this imbalance that happens. So if we kind of don't appreciate and pay attention to those other things, the patient's never truly going to get well. And this was really hit home to me when I started doing house calls. Because I would have cases where I'd be like, I know what's going on. I'm treating this pet the right way, but they're not getting better. And then I would go to the home, and I started going to the home, and I was like, wow, that's why nobody's getting better. Because sometimes you go into that home, and you're like, this home is sick. Okay? And if the home is sick, there's no way that the animal is going to get well. So it really kind of made me realize that there was a lot more going on than just the set of symptoms that the pet was presenting for. Okay? And sometimes I feel like I treat the client as much as I'm treating the pet. Because ultimately, it's like I call it psychic acupuncture. I'm doing needles on the pet, but I'm like, you got to get better. Because if there's not that connection, that's a huge bond. You know, we all know this. There's a huge tube of energy that goes between us and our animals. And that sometimes it's really not a healthy one. Okay? So if we have to make that connection be healthy. And if we don't, then we're not going to ever have true healing. Okay? So another big thing that I think that we kind of like, the way I practice may be a little bit different than we think of in the conventional realm, is that it's looking more at the root of the problem. Okay? We're very, very good with conventional medicine, allopathic medicine, with addressing the branch of the disease. Okay? Because the branch is a manifestation, it's a symptom. Okay? We have strong drugs that say if I'm throwing up, we have better and better anti-nausea medications. But nothing's really addressing why that dog or cat is throwing up. Okay? And sometimes it comes down to like the fact that the cat's stressed out because the kid's chasing it around the house all day long, you know, or that the other cat's been picking on it the whole time. So there's all these other things that are kind of like a root imbalance that if we don't address that, ultimately the pet's never going to get better. And I think where the holistic modalities shine is actually getting to that. And I see a lot of cancer patients. My practice in San Diego got so busy with cancer patients at one point that I couldn't see anything else. I had to close my practice to other problems. Just cancer. That's pretty disgustingly staggering, scary. Okay? So I guess my point is that you have like chemo, surgery, radiation, very powerful treating the branch. They hack it off. But unless you address that root, that branch is just going to grow back. Okay? And the other thing that we look at from a holistic perspective is that everybody's body wants to be well. We innately, the body is set to be healthy. So we just have to, as practitioners, encourage the body's desire to do that. Encourage the body's innate ability to heal. This is a great quote from David Hoffman. The healing power of nature is the inherent self-organizing and healing process. It's present in all living systems that establishes, maintains, and restores health. He's an amazing herbalist, David Hoffman, and it's so true. If you actually look, like evolutionarily, we're wired. Animals are wired to be healthy. And we end up, unfortunately, I think, in the toxic soup of a world we live, we set them up for kind of all these disease processes. But if we actually look at it truly, our job isn't necessarily just to address the symptoms. It's actually to try and get to that inherent healing capability. So how do we do that? So I just wanted to make a point on this real quick. It's one of the foundational things that I always talk about. I call it my ABCs. And clients come in to see me, and I always say, I practice the principle of avoidance. Okay? And what does that mean? Don't put anything into the body unless you have to. Okay? Because the body wants to be well. And I mean, this doesn't mean just drugs and chemicals. This means like supplements. Like I sometimes see people come in, they got like a garbage bag full of crap that they're trying to give in their cat. And I'm like, well, that's too much. It's too much. The body's not going to understand any of that information. So I try and simplify things. I'm trying to practice avoidance. And I'm going to make a comment here. And I think, you know, people, from an avoidance standpoint, I try to avoid drugs, toxins, pesticides. And one of those things that I try and be very pragmatic about is vaccination. Okay? And unfortunately, there is a huge movement in our allopathic conventional veterinary community to over-immunize our pet population. Okay? I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I think vaccines have a very good place in medical care. I think they prevent. I mean, I was an emergency doctor. I treated parvo and distemper. I don't want to see those diseases. I saw some of the diseases that we see in cats, but I don't think that perpetuating, continually immunizing and reboostering these animals throughout the course of their life is an ideal way to maintain their health. Okay? And in fact, I think the things, a lot of that we do in the name of prevention are creating more problems than we're preventing. Okay? So think about it. Why is it that 50% of dogs die of cancer? 50%. Flip a coin, your dog gets cancer. 1 out of 3 cats. So what are we doing? Something has to be done wrong. Okay? So when I critically look at it, what are we putting into their bodies? One of the things I appreciated more in San Diego is that a lot of allopathic veterinarians, a lot of conventional veterinarians were running vaccine titers. I don't see that in Portland. I see a lot of clients who basically their animal goes in and on like the schedule, they get reboostered. Ron Schultz, huge veterinary immunologist, the one who started the vaccine protocols back in the 60s and 70s, he has gone around, he says, we are overdoing it, okay? If you actually do a vaccine titer, for example, for distemper and parvo, after your dog has been boosted as a puppy, and you go to boost it again at a year, and that vaccine titer is protective, they don't need another booster. Their immune system has already said, I am immune, okay? So if I do a blood test and it has an adequate antibody titer, don't vaccinate that patient, okay? Because what we've proven is that if you take an animal who's already immune, which again, most of these dogs who are continually boosted are, if we boost them in the face of that immunity, we set them up for what's called autoimmunity, which means your immune system starts to turn on itself, okay? And that, in my opinion, is right in the spectrum of cancer. So that's one thing that we can do is be mindful. Vaccinate, but don't over-vaccinate. So if we get to a point where the patient is a puppy, we want them protected. A kitten, we want them protected. But at a year, at 4 years, at 7 years, do they really need all those boosters? The one we're stuck with is rabies. So build up the immune system is B, okay? So through good food and appropriate supplementation. I mean appropriate, judicious supplementation. I'm not a supplement salesman, but I do think some animals do better when they have certain things attended to. And that's based on an individual basis. There's no like, people sometimes when I give these lectures, they want to know what to do. Go home, give omega fatty acids, antioxidants, how much vitamin C, how much E, da-da-da. And I don't do that because every animal is different, okay? And we tailor the therapy to the individual. That's the nature of holistic medicine. If you want a cookie cutter, you're just going to go and plug them into the allopathic model, okay? And then commitment to the process. Because this is the thing, is like a lot of people, they want the magic potion. They've been through the ringer. They've had every test done. They've spent thousands of dollars, gone through the internal medicine specialists, the surgeons, the CT scans, everything. And they come to me, and none of it's worked, but they want me to fix it. And they want me to fix it quickly, okay? And the bottom line, this is one of my teachers told me years ago, is that it takes as long to get well as we have been sick. So if you have been sick for 8, 9 years, it's going to take a long time to get better, okay? That doesn't mean you're going to be horribly sick for those times that we're trying to get you better. And sometimes we see huge improvements. But the nature of health and disease is this is like a big wave, okay? And what our job, my job as a practitioner, is to prevent this kind of stuff and just keep everybody with this kind of like dynamic disequilibrium of like their body is trying to stay healthy and there's going to be peaks and valleys, but if we can keep focusing on that positive outcome. So yes, there are so many holistic modalities, so many, and I can't not even come close to touch on based on all these today. Nutrition to me, and this is the one thing, if you guys leave today and you go home and you decide to critically evaluate how you are feeding your pets or those animals who come into your practices, then I have done a good job. But the food is the most important medicine you put into your animal on a daily basis. And that needs to be a focus of everything you do is what do you put into their body to sustain them, okay? And unfortunately, we'll get into it. Maybe that's fortunately. So nutraceutical supplements, I think judicious supplementation is very important. Cut my teeth doing acupuncture. I'm a big believer in traditional Chinese veterinary medicine. I see it work on many cases where conventional care hasn't even come close to touching it. Botanical medicine to me is herbal medicine. Okay, it's one of my passions. I think plants have many of the answers that we seek. Homeopathy, it's a pretty far out medical system and it's extremely effective. It's a little bit kind of a mind bender for me to kind of get into today. So I think what I'll do is leave that for another day. But I just wanted to put it up there. And it is something that I use as a modality that I treat with. And homotoxicology is kind of like the modern version of that. Because our planet is so sick, okay? And there's so many obstacles to cure. Like classical homeopathy, like back in the late 1800s, so Samuel Hahnemann came out with these remedies. There was a different planet then. Now we have so many obstacles to cure in the way of them responding to the remedies, even if they're appropriate. So homotoxicology takes into that consideration. Chiropractic and osteopathy, massage, rehab, physical therapy, all very, very effective physical modalities, working within the body's structure to try and remind the body how it works to be normal, okay? Reiki and energy medicine. This is when I was back in the day when I first took Max in. I was just like, that stuff's woo-woo, get your crystals out and all that shit. So to me, I was like, I had no basis. I was like, this is, go whatever. And then people would start talking about Reiki and crystals and this, and I was like, no, 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 da, da, da. I didn't have any patience for it. And here I am now, I'm attuned, I'm a Reiki master, and I have a whole different perspective. So the thing is, things change, and just keep your mind open. And the one thing, and I say this towards the end, is like, if what you're doing isn't working, do something else. That's so simple, and it's common sense, but that unfortunate thing is that common sense is not common, okay? And then Erconia, on the whole energy medicine thing, is, and I use a low-level laser, which I have found to be super effective too. And that's got a lot, more and more allopaths are kind of including that into their practice. And I think as a via modality, the particular laser I use is a little bit different, so we can talk a little bit about that today. Okay, think outside the bag or can. That's the fundamental thing. Again, the food that you put into your animals is the most important medicine that you put into their body on a daily basis, okay? Think about that nice, convenient little pelleted kibble. And you look at that, and then you look at this. What has more vitality? Food, right? Real food. So we got to look a little bit at a historical perspective. So what did the animals eat before we had pet food? Because dogs and cats have been around for millennia. What did they eat? Mice. They ravaged. They looked at. They went into the garbage heap. They got scraps that were thrown to them, bones that were thrown to them. They ate food, like real food, right? And then what happened is basically World War II, the Great Depression. We didn't have a lot of food to even feed the people. Okay, we were looking almost at mass euthanization of animals. Okay, so then somebody came up with this really smart stopgap measure. Short term was meant to be to feed a grain cereal-based diet to these carnivores and supplement it with some fish. They would throw in like chicken feed and fish heads and stuff like that, so as a protein source, a cheap protein source. But they had this kind of sustenance that they could survive on. Okay, but it was really convenient, and the consumer liked it, and it was so easy. And guess what? The pet food manufacturers made money, tons of money, so it's stuck, unfortunately. And it's been the downfall, in my opinion, of a lot of it's created a lot of the health problems we see in our current situation. From a conventional veterinary education standpoint, I could tell you, I think Cornell's a pretty good vet school. I had the worst education in nutrition. Okay, the pet food companies, they come in, they buy you lunch. You get the color glossy brochures. They say, look at this, as Eukanuba and IAMS and science diet and blah, blah, blah. And you get, they say, this is what we're feeding now. And they say, they never tell you one time what goes into that food. They never tell you how it's processed or preserved. So I was feeding science diet to my dog. It's what vets feed their pets. I didn't know there's ground corn in it. But I didn't even think to read the label. So the thing to me is like, that's pretty bad, right? So my point is that we don't get the education in nutrition. The pet food company has their hooks into the veterinary schools across this country. So when you get out, you think that IAMS, you think that it's science diet, you think that Royal Canin is it, and it ain't. So you gotta you have to realize where it's coming from. So what happened to me is I realized whoa, I started reading labels. That's what blew my mind. I was like, holy shit, what are we doing to these animals? And I mean, first, and just stop real quick. Cats, in my opinion, should never, ever, ever eat dry food. Blanket. They evolutionarily are a desert species. They evolved in northern Africa. Their kidneys work extremely hard to concentrate their urine. And we feed them dry food. It works their kidneys even harder. It pushes them into kidney failure. It pushes them into bladder problems. The whole premise is that cats are obligate carnivores. The ideal diet would be ground up mice and birds. Okay? And then we ask them to survive on 40 to 50% carbs.
Why do they like this?
Because I had a colleague who I met in a holistic training course who used to work for the pet food industry. And she says, you have no idea what they do to make those cats eat that food. They have all these experiments. They figure out all these different flavor enhancers, things they spray on it. It's like, I call it kitty crack. Yeah. I mean, because they have to figure out how to make them want to eat that, because otherwise they would never want it. And the other thing that's comes into the whole processed kibble thing is that processing, the heating it, that changes the whole nature of the food. Okay, and there's actual Maillard reactions which happen when you heat food to that high a temperature, which creates carcinogens within the food. So we're actually creating cancer by the processing of the kibble diets. Okay, so evolutionarily, you got to think about it. Dogs, cats, that's what they ate. They would be hungry, they'd kill something, they eat it. They're very much built to eat meat, organ, bone, and maybe a little bit of produce if they eat some grass or something that was in the ingesta of their prey, right? So then there's a huge raw food movement that people are like, we should feed. And I do, honestly, to be perfectly honest, in my own opinion, I think that's probably an optimal way to feed dogs and cats. But I have to say that it's not for everyone. And I guess my blanket statement is there's no one right way to feed everybody. You have to tailor the patient's food to that patient. And especially when it comes to the whole raw food thing. Because I want you to just think about it this way, is that yes, dogs and cats are like less than 0.1% different than their wild ancestors in terms of their DNA. But because of humans, we can't rely on that anymore. Okay? Purebred dogs, that is not what Mother Nature intended. Okay? You take an animal who's purebred, and we gradually weaken their gene pool, because there's no way to not. You can't have a purebred animal have strong genes. We keep trying to find different ones to breed them to, but ultimately we've created this weakened genetics. Okay? And then we feed them crappy food, and then we over-immunize them, and then they have offspring. Okay? So those offspring are weakened, right? And the generation interval for dogs and cats, they can pump them out. So how quickly can we influence evolution? Really quickly. And I think, to be honest with you, the animals that we have living today are weaker, far weaker as a species than those animals that we had 50 years ago. Okay? But people like their purebreds, right? But we create the problem. So people, I always try and enlighten them. Is like they come in, they're like, well, he's a purebred dog. Blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but he has purebred problems. So now we have to work within the realm of this, and we have to realize that there is an obstacle. Limitation is that genetics limits it. Okay, we're only going to get them to be so much healthier. We can make them be as optimally healthy as possible, but ultimately there's going to be obstacles to it. So again, my whole deal with processed kibble is like my least favorite of all the food options. Okay, there are animals who have to eat it. Some don't do well on anything else. I have clients who bang their heads against the wall trying to get their dog to eat a raw food diet, and it's throwing up, having diarrhea, and blah, blah, blah. They tried left and right. It ain't working. Do something different. What I'll sometimes do is I work on that animal's digestive tract because it's weak. Something's wrong with it, and I'll try and get that. But to me, I don't try and fit the patient to the diet. I try and fit the diet to the patient, right? You know what I'm saying? So, canned food is better than processed kibble. Raw, in my opinion, is optimal. But there are a lot of options. You have, I get to use this. You have Honest Kitchen. It was a company out of San Diego. They took all human-grade ingredients. It was all raw, and they just dehydrated it. And you add hot water to it, stir it up, makes a nice, nutritious stew. A lot of animals love it. And I see them do far better on this than even this is one of the better kibbles out there, Origin. I mean, they have a great, it's all well-sourced and everything like that. But still, remember, 40 to 50% of carbohydrate in order to make it into a kibble. Okay? You have to have, even these high-protein, grain-free ones, it's all marketing. It has to have a carb source, some starchy carb, to make it into a kibble. Okay? So don't buy into the hype. So this is actually like in least favorite, a little bit less favorite, ideal, a good option. And then home prepared, to me, you can have a home prepared raw diet, but the point I want to make with home prepared is that it should be well thought out. If you feed like chicken and rice, people come in, they're like, I'm home cooking. I'm like, oh, that's great. What do you feed? Chicken and rice? I'm like, well, you may as well just give them a bag of kibble because you're missing out on so many holes in their diet. You need to make sure that the nutrients and everything is kind of dialed in. And I'm not like a spreadsheet nutritionist where I make every sure like the chromium and blah, blah, blah. Dogs survived for millennia before we had these spreadsheets. And I think if we look fundamentally, that kind of nice segue into this, and if we look fundamentally as to what they need, like this is the cat pyramid. So we have the bottom, I can't read it so well, it says muscle meat, 80 to 83% muscle meat. And then we have secreting organs like liver and other organs, edible bone, and then you add in some supplements to balance it out. Now look at this dog. Which has more vitality, I saw this picture in the internet. I'm like, that's classic. Because, you put that stuff down, you put down a piece of meat, the dog, this is nature, Okay, traditional Chinese veterinary medicine. This is kind of the whole medical system, including acupuncture. It's very complex, but also very eloquently helpful in kind of like approaching a lot of these tougher cases. Some foundational concepts, so balance. Okay, you'll hear a lot of people talking about imbalance, and that's a lot of what I try and treat is the pattern of disharmony. So optimal health is obtained when everything in the body and the environment is in balance. And everybody knows what qi is. You heard qi? Qi is like your vital force. Prana, you hear about that too, same kind of thing. So qi circulates smoothly and freely in the body. And disease is thought to occur when there's either a deficiency of this vital force or there's an obstruction to the smooth flow of this energy. Now, Chinese medicine is very much built on metaphors because it started thousands of years ago when you had these shamans sitting up in the mountains and they were watching the cycle of life through the forces of the seasons. And they started to realize that people, our health, had problems that also seemed to cycle with the changes in the seasons, and that we could be most healthy if we appreciated those changes, okay? So I came up with this little metaphor to kind of bring up the smooth flow of qi in the body and how disease occurs. So I start off with the mountain stream metaphor, and I think about it like this way, is that at the top of the mountain, at the peak of the mountain, we're pure snow. That's your essence. In Chinese medicine, we call that your jing, okay? Unadulterated, pure essence. And as we age, that snow starts to melt, and it starts to run down into this stream, okay? And the course of that stream is our life. And as we start to go, we're in our little infancy, and we start to go smoother and faster, and we start to go down that mountain. And then we hit our teenage years, and we start going really fast. And then we start hitting our 20s and 30s, and we may run into a lot of obstructions along the way. But we're 20 or 30 years old because we're impervious. We feel like it's not going to hurt us. We just keep banging off these things. And by the time we get into our 30s and 40s, well, maybe that stream's not flowing so well anymore, you know? And there's not that smooth flow because we've used up too much of it in the front part of our life. And as we start to get a little farther down the mountain, then that stream slows down. And it starts to pool up on the side. And that pooling up of energy on the side of that mountain stream is stagnation. That stagnation is that sore knee you have. That stagnation is the neck pain, that digestive problems. And then stagnation in its worst form, as it really pools up and it starts to get all that mossy, stinky stuff on the top, that's cancer. Okay? So I felt this metaphor is really helpful for kind of like, it's just describing how things move through the body, and then how we end up with our disease states is as that energy starts to not move as smoothly and freely. So how can we address that? So that's where these branches of traditional Chinese veterinary medicine come in. Acupuncture is hugely helpful. You can see our little friend here. So we're going to talk about acupuncture, but this guy's got little acupuncture needles all over, and we actually hook up a little electrodes to really get some stronger stimulation of the needles. Herbal medicine is, again, a huge modality that is very helpful in addressing kind of this whole qi imbalance and the movement of energy in the body. Food therapy is the utilization of food, energetics of food, to correct that energetic imbalance in the patient. Okay, a quick example. You have a dog who's hot all the time, real red tongue, they're panting all the time, they have like kind of like always moving yang energy, they're like, hey, like a Jack Russell, hey, gotta go, and he's got all those like damp heat lesions on his back, hot spots, and he tends to get angry really easily. I would feed that dog a cooling diet. I would feed him something that has yin tonics in it, something that's like turkey, something that's going to kind of calm the system down, take out the heat, and kind of balance out the situation. And it's amazing. You take a dog who's all wired and wacky like that, you put him on a cooling diet, just that, for a couple of months, and you'll take that level down. You know, and it's pretty cool just to change them with making a difference in the diet. And it's so simple. Tui Na is a Chinese medical massage. I'm a big fan of massage. I think massage is a very, very helpful modality for working with these guys, especially with animals with orthopedics, stagnations, soreness, stiffness, stuff like that. And Qigong Tai Chi, there's not a lot of dogs other than Nanook here who do Qigong Tai Chi, but I think animals appreciate this stuff. There's a woman in town, Lisa Burney, and she does pranic healing for animals. And she has, at my practice, the first Saturday of every month, we have a meditation seminar. So people can bring their animals and meditate. And we actually we'll kind of feel their auric fields before and after, and it's amazing how much it changes. And I have a Qigong practice I do every morning, and my cat is like a clock. As soon as I start doing the breathing exercise, he's like, "Meow," and he just goes and he just kind of like hangs out right there. So they feel this stuff, and I think they appreciate what we're trying to do. Anybody have any pets who've had acupuncture? Yeah, good experiences?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, so acupuncture is and it's probably one of those that us as in the conventional community kind of have some acceptance for. You're not getting out the crystals and doing all that stuff. You're just like, okay, put the needle in, it causes this change, the dog gets better. So there's a lot more people who are billing themselves as integrative, where they have a conventional practice, but they also have somebody who does acupuncture, which I think is great. You know, I'm not saying you have to jump full 2 feet into the holistic thing, but at the very least is like giving people modalities to be able to help. And the more people out there doing it, the better off the pets are going to be. So a couple of basic fundamentals. So we talk about like that qi, where we already talked about the movement of that energy. Well, how does the qi move? So the qi moves along meridians. They're the pathways along the body by which the qi circulates. And we access this energy along the meridians at the acupuncture points. So they're very precise anatomic locations on the surface of the body where we can access that energy. And these points have been figured out over hundreds of years through trial and error of actually kind of elucidating what each point did. And there's sort of like 5% of the population is extremely qi sensitive, where you can have a person puts a needle in here and be like, oh, I feel it in my colon. Or, this kind of stuff. So you have, they've done over hundreds of years is working all this out. And the acupuncture needle placement will actually have its effects locally where you put the needle, but there's also distal effects, meaning distant effects, where it actually will affect internal organ function as well. And they've done, because as Western scientific minds, we want to know why and how. So through extensive research, they've actually been able to figure out that a lot of the anatomic locations of the points and meridians were found to be in areas of the highest concentrations of blood vessels in the body, blood vessels and nerves. So even without having any understanding of neuroanatomy and physiology, the ancient Chinese figured out all this without that information. So people always say, well, how does that work? So then I start talking about qi and this and that, and their eyes glaze over and they think I'm a whack job. So I say, when you put the needle in, it causes a local change in the tissues. Here, needle, here. Pain receptors, nerves, goes to the spinal cord, up this sensory neuron, into the spinal cord here. Now, this little synapse here is causing all sorts of changes, okay? And what's happening is there's all these neurotransmitters that are released. There's a lot of endorphins. Endorphins are like hundreds of times more powerful than morphine, okay? Enkephalins, a lot of things that are getting diurnins, all these different neurotransmitters. In Colorado State, that's their whole premise, is their medical acupuncture training. So they teach you all those neurotransmitters. This is how it all works. They don't believe in qi. They don't believe in the movement of energy. It's all biochemical, okay? But ultimately, to explain it to people, it's easier for them to understand that you place the needle, there's a feedback into the spinal cord, which causes the release of neurotransmitters, which actually will affect the motor neuron of affecting that area. But you also, here's the coolest thing for me, is that depending on where that location is in the spinal cord, so if I put a needle in here and I say it's over my liver, okay, my liver association point, well, this neurofeedback is going to go and affect this area here locally, but I'm actually going to have an influence on that. This will go out in the innervation to the liver. So if I have a dog or a cat with liver problems and I treat their liver association point because I'm at that segmental unit of their spinal cord where the liver would be located, I'm actually influencing their liver function, which blew my mind. And when you actually have animals get better, you're like, whoa, it's amazing. Okay, so the most common application of acupuncture is in the treatment of orthopedic and musculoskeletal problems. Okay, the most common. That's what most of the time they come in limping, they're hurting. That's where acupuncture is most effective. It's very effective at alleviating acute and chronic pain. So this is little Buddy Webster. Buddy Webster was actually probably one of my first acupuncture patients ever. And he was and little did I know, he started a theme of so basically he had, his veterinarian had done everything. They had done all these tests, they couldn't figure out what was going on. He'd seen the internal medicine specialist who referred him to me. She was like, I don't know what to do here, take him. So and here I was fresh out of acupuncture going, I got to treat this, I got to do it. And meanwhile, he was like a train wreck, right? He had heart failure, his kidneys were weak, he had arthritis, he had allergies, and he was doing this thing she called the chokes. That was why he was coming to see me, because he was there for the chokes. So I said, well, I don't know if I'll do my best. So, and long story short is I just started treating him what I had learned. And lo and behold, Buddy got better. I mean, Kathy still sends me Christmas cards, and he was just an amazing little being. And he lived nobody expected him to live even 6 months. And he was 3 or 4 years later, he's still I'm still going. And, and it was pretty powerful for me as a practitioner to see. Okay, so again, back to this, same thing. Orthopedic diseases, a lot of arthritis, degenerative joint disease, hip dysplasia. Cruciate injuries, very, very common in dogs. I can get into why I think they have them, but I don't have the time. But stifle injury, cruciate injuries, I feel can be very, very effectively treated with a combination of acupuncture, herbs, and especially low-level laser. I have a number of these guys who have gotten through without having to have surgery. Stifle is your knee. Yeah, that's your knee, yeah. Intervertebral disc disease, that's where acupuncture is your bread and butter when you first started. Yeah, it's you treat a lot of back problems. When the first time I ever made a paralyzed animal walk again, I started crying. I mean, there's nothing as powerful as that. I mean, this is a dog, and her name was Mocha, and she had had surgery, and she didn't have any voluntary motor. She had some deep pain and stuff like that, but she was dragging, right? And I was like, we're gonna treat her, and I started treating her. I started doing electroacupuncture, and it took a long time. But we were committed. And she'd drop her off at the specialty clinic where I was working. I'd needle her, and we had a relationship, me and Mocha. And I was like, you got to get better, dog. It took about 8 treatments. And so one day, she just looked at her mom, and she just got up and started walking. And like she came in, and her mom's crying, and I'm like, what's the matter? What's the matter? You know, of course, her mom's crying. And she's like, she's walking. And I just looked at her, and she looked at me, and I'm getting goosebumps. And we just started crying. I was like, oh my God. And then I walked out of the room. I was like, yeah. You know, it was like to have that kind of an effect, you know. And I mean, I was an emergency doctor. I'd saved lives. I had animals dying, but I never had something on that level to occur. So that's pretty special. Degenerative myelopathy, again, neurologic problems can be affected with acupuncture. Gastrointestinal, you know, so this is where, you know, I don't reach for the acupuncture needle right away, but I find that traditional Chinese medicine, actually holistic modalities in general, can benefit a lot of these guys where we've run out of options from the conventional world. You got gastrointestinal disease, immune-mediated disease, all these things. I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but I think a lot of these things, we create these problems, right? Epilepsy, maybe not so much, but in my opinion, and I don't know if this is done a lot, but I'm seeing it time and time again where animals who have a seizure disorder are continually vaccinated. Like, I remember in school, do not vaccinate animals with seizures. It was like basic. Yet, and even on the manufacturer recommendation of rabies vaccine, they say do not vaccinate animals with seizures. And I'm seeing it happen all the time. I'm like, it's insanity to me.
Can you get an exception?
You should.
Okay.
Yeah, so I write a lot of letters to the county.
Okay.
So I do, probably weekly. I write one, but they're, you know, and thankfully they're accepting of those, you know, because I think there has to be a shift in how we're doing these things, and until there is, like it takes a lot for me to give a rabies shot. I'm almost at the point in my practice where I'm like, I have to write an exemption, or I'm like, you need to go someplace else because I can't do it, because I know it's going to be in the detriment to the patient, because I know the dog's immune, and I know that he's on the cusp, he's on the precipice, that if we push the wrong way, we're going to lose him. And it's not going to be like crash burn. It could just be then we just, and I've pulled them out of the, I've had those ones where you pull them from the brink and they go to the general vet because they got the little note card, the postcard in the mail. Got to get my booster. You get the booster and then a crash burn. So I see a ton of this, ton. And I have a lot of modalities that I think are effective. And my goal isn't to like, I don't look at it as like I'm curing cancer. As I look at it as I'm trying to help that patient live the best quality of life for however long it can. And I don't have any, you know, people come in, what do you think? What percent? Da, da, da. I'm like, I don't play that game. Because I can tell you, I mean, I could talk all day about the number of cases that have come in and they're giving them like, again, 2 weeks. And then the dog goes walking in the specialty hospital like a year later and the surgeon turned white and nearly fainted. Because he was like, I thought that dog would be dead. So, and the thing is, we're treating the root, you know, because you can use your chemo, you can use your radiation, you can do your surgery, you can cut off all the tumors. We have all these whistle bells. This facility here, I mean, they do all sorts of wonderful things in this regard, right? But it ain't going to fix it until you do something to treat the root of it. Whatever happened to make that stagnation, to make that cancer come out, needs to be addressed. Otherwise, you're just spinning your wheels. It makes a lot of money, but what are you doing for the greater good of the patient? Sorry, I get a little fired up. Herbal medicine. So this is kind of like, I'm very, very passionate about herbs. I think that plants have a lot of the answers that we seek. And I know the pharmaceutical industry knows this too, because they're doing a tons of work trying to find the extracts from the plants that they can use medicinally. But the pharmaceutical industries are forgetting that the plants already know, because there's hundreds and thousands of compounds within the plants that work in a synergy, in this beautiful, beautiful dance to try and help each other. So for example, if you pull that extract out, it's highly toxic. But you forgot that inside that plant, there were 4 other compounds which mitigated that toxicity so that the plant could be used as a medicine. So when we start messing around with Mother Nature is when we cause more problems as usual. So I think, I mean, these are, I mean, being in Portland, it's a wonderful place to be an herbalist. I mean, you just go for a walk. It's like everywhere there's medicine. So everybody know what this is? Yes. I only pulled 20 of these out of my front lawn. Yeah. Milk thistle, yeah. Chamomile. Come on. Yes, Oregon grape, berberis. So this is probably, these are some of my favorite plants, and they're they're so present and so everywhere. And I think that they have so many of the answers. And I think that we need to look to them, I think, more and not get so focused on the minutia of trying to find the extract. There's a lot of different medical systems. I'm versed in traditional Chinese medicine. I studied a lot with the Qi Institute in Florida. And then I do a lot of Western herbal medicine, and that's most of it's self-taught and reading tons of books and exploring the plants that are around our environment and learning their medicinal effects. So the basic principles is that across all of these medical systems, okay, we're looking at the actions, the energetics, the tastes, and the organ affinities. These are very important as when we're prescribing either just a single herb or a complex formula. So, you know, one point I wanted to make is that we don't want to look at herbs as just a natural drug. Okay? If I have a patient who's got diarrhea, I'm not going to say, here's your herb for diarrhea. That's not the point. Okay? Again, we come back to that innate healing capability that the patient has, and we want to encourage that. So I may use an herb in my formula that has some effect preventing diarrhea, but I'm going to use other herbs that are going to tonify that digestive tract, that may provide as a food source for some of the probiotics. So there's a complexity to it. There's an art to it that I think takes into account a lot of different things, including the constitution of the patient, okay? Because that's going to, and the presentation of the patient. What is the pattern differentiation? And this, to me, is what I look at a lot when I'm prescribing herbs, is like, what is that pattern of disharmony? What happened? What's that root problem? Because I want to address that. Because if I don't address that, they're not going to get better. And then my treatment principles are going to be what addresses this pattern differentiation. Now, this is, I lecture at the vet school once a year, and Oregon State. And I throw this up, and I always hear, oh, you know, like, you're freaking me out. So basically, I put it up kind of just to show you that it seems complex, but the system is actually very, very logical. Okay? So if we're trying to make a diagnosis, first we say, where is it? Okay? And then that looks at, is it at the heart? Is it in the spleen? Spleen is digestion in Chinese medicine. Is it in the lung? Is it the kidney? Or is it the liver? So basically, not too hard. You break it down. What's the 5-element organ system that's affected? And then, what is going on with that system? Is it something that's excess? Is it a lot of heat? Is it excess cold, excess damp? All these different things that can be going on. Or is it a deficiency pattern? Okay? Are they weak? Okay, is their kidney energy low? Is their heart chi low? All these different things. And then based on all this information, we establish a diagnosis, and then that allows us to prescribe herbs. Okay? That allows us to choose food that's going to affect this. That allows me to choose acupuncture points which are going to affect this. That lets me look nutritionally and see what other things that we can do to kind of fill the holes. Okay? So it's it seems complex, but it's very, very logical. Okay? All right. Now, again, I told you guys, like, back in the day, I was like, this is all so woo-woo, and I kind of like wanted to say, you know, I was there. I was that guy who was like, get out of here. You're in your Reiki, I'll show you. So the thing is, so Reiki, okay, does anybody know what this is and have any experience with it? Yes?
At least with humans, yeah.
With humans? Okay. All right. So, I mean, if people talk about energy medicine, you ever hear about pranic healing or chakras? Okay, so essentially what it comes down to is that energy powers all of us, okay? It's our chi. It's what kind of that smooth flow of energy through the body which allows us to be healthy, all right? So Reiki, that same energy, is something that individuals, when they become attuned by somebody who's a Reiki master, an attunement is just a ceremony kind of just allowing for you to become a channel for that energy, all right? So what happened in my journey was that I started to realize the more and more I was doing acupuncture on patients, the more and more I was connecting with the patients on kind of somewhat of a deeper level than just what the surface was showing me. I started to get more of a sense of what was going on with their energetic bodies, okay? Where I am now at the point where I can run my hand over an animal and I can feel it, okay? And when you start to feel that stuff, I always knew when I was actually treating animals for acupuncture, I was having way more of an effect than just that needle was doing. There was something going on, a connection between me and that animal that I didn't understand, but I knew it was more powerful than just the acupuncture. So when I got attuned to Reiki, I was like, aha, that's what it is. And it's really transformed my life because I didn't actually become attuned to Reiki because I wanted to treat animals. I needed to get attuned to Reiki because I needed to heal myself. When I got here, I was really sick. And Reiki was probably the most transformative for me to actually understand where I was, what I needed to do, and how to get better. And it's something that I've incorporated into a self-healing practice that I do every day. And it's part of a ritual that I provide for my patients. You know, and you start to have really kind of whacked out things happen. You start to be like, there's something way more force here than I have any comprehension. I'll give you an example. When I was doing my house call practice, I used to send distance Reiki to my next client. So I would imagine, there's symbols that we use in Reiki, and I would use the distance symbol, and I would send the energy into that house. And there were clients who'd be like, the dog knew you were coming. You know, there was like that one dog, Seamus, who'd be like, start flipping out like 15, 20 minutes, and the owner wouldn't have said anything, and the dog knew we were coming. And I would always ask for guidance and give me some, help the animals so that I can help them. And, I have time and time again where like animals who don't like people like me. Where things like that, where you're just making a connection with them that I can't explain, and I have to feel that there's something more at work than I can even do a good job of explaining today. So my thing is that those who become attuned to the energy are then able to channel it, okay? And then you can help these animals and their people so that you can actually help heal issues that range from so much beyond just the physical. Because so many animals, when you're working in rescue organizations, there's so much baggage, so much fear, so much concern. And those things can be helped with Reiki, okay? With healing touch, with pranic healing, with all these things. So just because we don't have our way to Western biomedically understand it and put it into a box and measure it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and doesn't mean it doesn't work.
Sort of like the internet. I don't understand it.
Right on, exactly. Does everybody kind of get this? And it's like I'm not so woo-woo, but I've become more woo-woo, and I had like a huge identity crisis when I was kind of going through this whole round. I'm like, God, I'm that guy. I got a crystal grid on my desk. What the, But the thing is, my plan is, and I'll put it out there for you guys, is I want to have a seminar where I can attune you guys to Reiki, so then you can go home and use it for your pets, so that this becomes something that continues to grow. And you can get the sense that I get, and it's pretty amazing. Okay, so last thing on energy. So this is Timmy. Does anybody know Timmy? Does anybody else know Timmy? Timmy came to see me. I didn't know he was so famous. So he came in to see me, and apparently, his story is kind of sad. I'll share it real quick. Timmy was born from a mother who the owner would give the pregnant cat neurotoxic flea medications on purpose so that the babies were born with neurologic problems. Okay? Yeah. So and then he'd sell the cats for $100 on Craigslist for drunken cats for $100. Yeah. So Timmy was an offspring of the drunken cat phenomenon. Okay? The guy's going to go to hell, so there will be some ramifications. So Timmy was a floppy cat. He had a cerebellar abiotrophy, so he had a lot of neurologic problems. So he had been treated by another practitioner in town with acupuncture for a long time, helping him very, very much. And then he came to see me when he was diagnosed with an extremely aggressive form of lymphoma, okay, which was ravaging his intestinal tract. The cat was given less than 2 weeks to live. The longest a cat with this form of the disease had ever lived was 19 days. Okay, so I said, well, shit, what am I going to do? So I just do what I do. And one of the things I threw in was using low-level laser. Okay, and with the low-level laser, well, I'll just finish Timmy's story. So what I did is I started using acupuncture, but I also started using a low-level laser, okay? And with time, I treated Timmy weekly. And when I first met Timmy, he had lost basically probably close to a third of his body weight. He would go to eat. He wanted so badly to eat, and then he would just go, bleh! He was like instantly. He would just throw it up. And he wanted to. You could see it. I was like, dude, you want to eat. But he couldn't do it. So I started treating him within 2 treatments. So within the first week, he started eating. And he was holding food down. And then we kept doing it. We kept doing it. And then he was connecting, and he was there. And you could see that Timmy was there. The lights came back on for a little while. Granted, I have to say, admittedly, it wasn't very long. But for a cat who was supposed to live 19 days, he lived, I think it was almost 2 to 3 months, something like that. So that's, to me, that was success. And to be honest with you, the thing that made me feel good about it, I'm going to start crying, is that we gave him the dignity, and we helped him when nobody else thought we could. So that's pretty powerful. So I use an Erconia PL5000, okay, and the way lasers work, and I throw this in there because it's, again, an energy kind of medicine. So all of our cells of our body have receptors called chromophores, okay, which measure light. And depending on the frequency and depending on the wavelength, the duration, the intensity of the light, will have trigger different cellular processes within the cells. So that chromophore is triggered and then activates different things. But the gist of it is that most of the time when we're using laser energy, we're helping promote wound healing. We're helping reduce pain. We're helping with inflammation in the body. Okay? And then they've done a ton of work now is that they're actually figuring out certain frequencies of using the laser to actually influence internal organs. So I'm actually seeing patients like Timmy who have cancer, which are really, really sick, and they can't get chemo, and they're dying, but they feel better. You know, and if you can just make them feel better, I'm not going to make the disease go away. That's not the point. The point is to give him some relief. It's quality of life. And that's where I think we're starting to see a lot of really cool things come about. Okay. Sorry to be a downer towards the end here. I didn't realize it happened. It even got me going. So putting it all together, don't forget your ABCs. Okay? Avoidance. Just ask yourself anytime you take your pet to the vet, do I need to do this? And if the answer is, like, if you're even questioning it, just say, hey, maybe I don't. Or, quite likely, what you could do is say, can I get a titer to check to see if I need to give that shot? And your veterinarian should say yes. Okay? And if not, then maybe you should start to think about finding another veterinarian. Because I think what, unfortunately, I'm finding is there's a lot of resistance to it, and I don't understand why. Because ultimately, the veterinarian's making more money doing the titer than they would be giving the shot. So you should just think about it. If you're looking at the greater good, does my animal truly need this? Because if he's already immune and I boost him in the face of that, I'm setting him up for problems. And again, in the name of prevention, we're doing things that are creating more problems than we're preventing. Okay?
Do you speak it out when you speak to the OSU students?
Yeah. I get myself in trouble. Actually, no. So I was invited at the May 2nd. I'm going to go down there, and there's a raw food panel. And they're having a nutritionist from the vet school. They're having a Purina rep. They're having a raw food pet company rep, and they're having me. So we'll see how it goes. I'll give you feedback. I'll let you know how it goes. So, okay, again, remember this is the take-homes. What is it? The most important medicine that you put in your pet every day is the food that they eat, okay? Listen to what your pet and their bodies are telling us. I call them my Buddhas. The animals teach me everything, okay? And what their body is telling you with a symptom presenting is something to listen to. It's not something to give them a shot to make it go away, okay? When an animal comes to me with allergies, those symptoms, those things that they're telling me should not be suppressed. Because when you push the disease, when you say, no, that's untoward, I don't like that, that itchy dog, he's got all these, give him some steroids, push the disease. What do? You push the disease deeper, okay? The body's bringing the disease to the surface. Appreciate that. Understand it. Work with it. Don't make it go away, because when you push it down, it just goes deeper, and then that's when bad things happen, okay? And if what you and your vet are doing is not working, be open to other possibilities. It's pretty simple. So the thing is, as veterinarians, I feel like our job is to give you information, okay? Just like I did. I'm not telling you what to do. I don't tell my clients what to do. I'm like, here's this information, here's my opinion, and the choice is yours. And ultimately, what I tell people is, I will support you in any decision you make. That's my job. I won't necessarily agree with it, but I will support you. But I'm going to try and give you the information so you make the right one, okay? So when you have that kind of as the premise of what we're doing, I don't think we can do any wrong. Ta-da! Thank you.